Hi everybody, it's Victoria and I'm here to finally film my November wrap-up. As predicted, I have been absolutely crazy busy at work and my kids had a concert this week, so I have just had no time at all to film. So I'm excited to finally wrap up the month of November. So I thought I would start with the one fiction book that I read in November. I participated in Nonfiction November for most of my reads, and I only read one fiction book, and that fiction book was really excellent and really fun. Also, I buddy read it with Emily from Books for Life is her channel, so I'll link her down below if you're not following her already. Make sure you're subscribed to her. She is awesome. We read Skyward by Brandon Sanderson. I really wanted to pick this up in the month of November because Starsight came out at the very end of the month of November, which you can maybe see it's sitting on my shelf over there, so I'm really excited to get to it. So I had to read this obviously first, but Skyward is the first book in a new young adult series by Brandon Sanderson, and this story follows Spensa, our young female protagonist. Spensa is a young lady who is trying to get into this flight school. When we meet her, there's a very prestigious flight school in her society on her planet, and the flight school's main goal is to train young people to become future pilots who can fight and defend against these weird alien mysterious creatures that no one really knows much about, but they have been oppressing humans pretty much for as long as anyone can remember, and they are called the Krell. And so we are meeting Spensa when she is trying to kind of make her way in the world, and she really wants to get into this flight school, but she has a little bit of an issue. Her father did something dishonorable, and she has this taint on her reputation of being the daughter of a coward, because allegedly her father fled in the middle of a major battle between the humans and the Krell. And it said that he fled the scene and just hightailed it out of there. So she has this tainted reputation as a young person, although she has done nothing wrong herself. But there's a lot of people who don't want her to go to flight school and become a pilot. This was in fact my first Brandon Sanderson book that I have ever read, which finally, and I'm in love. I love Brandon Sanderson already, and I realize this book is intended for a younger audience than me, but I still think that I think you could enjoy this as an adult at any age. It is so well written, so well paced. You can never underestimate the power of a well-paced book. It moves along quickly. There's always something new happening. I feel like there's just never a lull in this book. There's just always more action-packed adventure. And also the character work was excellent. Sometimes you read books where the plot is great and the character work kind of suffers, but no, the character work in this is also excellent. Spensa is so fun and feisty. There's so much humor in this. My particular favorite thing about Spensa is that she says really strange sentences like, "I will drink the blood of my enemies," and she's just like this young teenage girl. And so you just really love her, and she's very funny and endearing in a aggressive way. So I think Brandon Sanderson did a great job with this book. I cannot wait to read Starsight. I will say though, if I had to critique it further than that, I had a little bit of a struggle trying to read some of like the battle scenes, and that might just be because I don't read a lot of sci-fi. I don't read a lot of books about planes and flight trajectories and like a lot of technical jargon about the actual battles and the planes. So that was just like, sometimes I would get bogged down a little bit in that, but other than that, I think that's just a me problem, and this is a great book and you should pick it up if you have not already. I cannot wait to get into book number 2, Starsight. Next, let's talk about what happened with me and Nonfiction November. I actually have a whole vlog where you can see me talk about Nonfiction November for a whole week of my life, the week of Thanksgiving, when I had a whole week off of work. So I'll link that in the cards if you want to check out my November vlog. But let's start this wrap up talking about a book that did not work for me. I actually DNF'd this book in chapter 2 really early on, and that was just really too bad because I really wanted to like it and I really wanted to learn something from it. But that was StarSpangled Banner, The Unlikely Story of America's National Anthem by Mark Ferris. Now, there's really nothing that I shouldn't like about this book. It's about the Star-Spangled Banner. It has a lot of really interesting tidbits about its origins and about the printing and publishing of the Star-Spangled Banner and how that was very different back in the beginning of America's inception than it is today, obviously. But the problem with this book for me was that it was written with a textbook feel. It was written really with academic language that honestly went over my head a lot of the time, and that probably just means I'm stupid. But I honestly felt a little stupid while reading this book because it's been a long time since I've taken American history, and I took AP American history, so like at one point I knew things about America and American history. I gotta do some more research, but the way this book is written, it assumes that you have a lot of background knowledge already about American history, and it kind of just like drops you into things and battles and people and places, and I was like, wait, I need a refresher on that. Can you please elaborate on that a little bit more? But no, he just kind of keeps going. And so I think it's just not intended for a reader like me who isn't like really remembering all the details and nitty-gritty of American history. I should learn something about my country. I'm not sure if I might revisit this someday eventually, but for now it's being set down. I might not get rid of it completely yet, but at least for now I'm not gonna pursue this one any further. So the first book that I finished for Nonfiction November was actually a reread for me. I had been intending on reading this one, and that was C.J. Mahaney's book, Living the Cross-Centered Life. This is a sort of Christian apologetics book, and so as I talk about it, just keep that in mind. But it is about how Christians need to just always be wrapped around Jesus and the cross, and how we need to always be reflecting on what the cross means, what it means for our daily lives, how it should affect how we behave, how we treat others, how we think about life. And so I remember this book being a very impactful one for me in my more formative years. And I hadn't read it again in a really long time. And I would say I think it's still a really solid book. I would say there were things here and there that I remembered differently, and some things that the author shares about himself that I'm like, well, I don't know if I fully agree with X, Y, and Z, but essentially it was as good as I remember almost. So I would say I would have rated this 5 stars. I think now it's more like a 4-star book for me. But other than that, this was pretty much as expected. There's a lot to glean from this book. I do recommend it. Next up, I read Unbroken by Laura Hillenbrand. And this book, I just kind of saw a few different people talk about it on Booktube. One of those people was Booktuber Summer Dawn, and she raved about this book. I remember watching either like a vlog or a video from her, and I saw this in a free little library in my town, and so I grabbed it because I recognized it. I remembered that I had seen really high ratings for it, and not really knowing a lot about it and a lot about the story, but wow, this maybe is one of my favorite books of the year, if not the favorite book. I'm not sure. I have to really think about that. I didn't expect that. But this is about Louis Zamperini. Louis Zamperini was a young man who was drafted into World War II in the Air Force, and his plane goes down in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. He survives that ordeal only to be picked up by the Japanese, and he becomes a Japanese prisoner of war. He has really horrible things happen to him in the Japanese prison camps, and he ends up at a prison camp that really no one really survived when they went to that prison camp, and he did. And he has just an amazing story. I cannot tell you how impactful his story is to me personally. The power of forgiveness. He has to forgive a lot of the people who did him horribly wrong, and he remembers so many horrible things, and he holds on to a lot of those grudges, and you just, it's just beautiful the ways in which you see him transform after having an unbearably difficult life, and you can't even imagine how difficult that life would have been. I mean, the normal person who has not served in the military, we can only sort of see from the outside, but to really have lived those experiences, we don't really know, you know, how we would have dealt with all those things, how it would have affected us. So just, it wrecked me. I think towards the end I was just like crying every like other page. I was crying, and I did the audiobook for most of this, and I do highly recommend the audiobook. I thought it was very well narrated. I picked up the physical copy for about the last chapter or two, and the audiobook really was riveting. I sometimes have a hard time listening to audiobooks because I don't pay attention to audiobooks very well. I'm often driving and doing other things, but I didn't have a problem with this audiobook really at all. I was very much focused on it. So either way, audiobook, physical copy, great experience, very impactful, has a big place in my heart now. Loved this book. 5 stars, 6 stars maybe, 5 stars. The next book that I picked up was for the challenge of True, I think, and that was Becoming Madeline, a biography of the author of A Wrinkle in Time by her granddaughters. And her own granddaughters wrote it, I think posthumously after she died. Another thing that's unique about how this book is written is that it is written kind of like a middle grade book. I think it was written with the realization that her audience was very much young people, and they wanted a biography that would be readable by middle grade readers and young people as well as adults. And so it's very short. It goes up to her life up about until A Wrinkle in Time is published. So that's all the information we get is from her childhood up until she is able to publish A Wrinkle in Time, which was quite a long journey for her, and she was rejected many, many times from every publisher imaginable for A Wrinkle in Time until finally someone picked it up. But this was a great read. I actually read this in a day, and it was really interesting because Madeline L'Engle, I felt for her a lot. I emphasized a lot with Madeline L'Engle's struggle as a creator to really find her footing. She and her husband were both in the arts, and they did not have an easy time of it. Madeline L'Engle really struggled to get her works published, and her husband was an aspiring actor, and he really struggled to get work, and then they tried to raise kids together. And so as a musician, I really understand that struggle to try to make your art your career. And so I really found myself reflected a lot in Madeline L'Engle. She was the kind of person that was really only motivated by the things that she loved. And if she didn't love it, she wasn't going to work hard at it. She had really bad grades as a kid in like math and Latin because she hated those subjects, but she had great grades in English because she loved that subject. And so I feel like in this book, there's just a lot to relate to Madeline L'Engle on that level, on really any level. I found her just really relatable, and I was rooting for her the whole time, even though I knew that she gets published eventually, right? But this was really interesting. The only thing I would complain about is I wish it was longer. If it was written for adults, we would have had maybe more information and would have had just a more detailed biography. So that's the only thing that I would change. But this was a great pick, I think, for middle grade March. If you want a nonfiction middle grade, I don't think I've ever read a nonfiction middle grade, actually. This might have been my first one. I think this would be a really great one to pick if you like Madeline and you have read her fiction and you're interested in learning more about her. I gave this book 4 stars. And I have one more book to talk about, and that is Everybody Lies, Big Data, New Data, and What the Internet Can Tell Us About Who We Really Are by Seth Stevens Davidowitz. Now, this book, I think, has a lot of really interesting ideas, but a little bit not provable. Some of the points in this book I just didn't feel like were really solid. This book was very conflicting for me because I think it has a lot of really interesting ideas and data to back it up, but I also felt like there was a lot we don't know yet about this subject, and there's a lot that he assumes from some data that I don't think you can sort of assume from the internet, all of these things. So let me back up a little bit. So he talks about gathering data from Google searches. So when you search in Google for anything, how do I make a pizza? Google has that information now. Google now knows that you searched how to make pizza. So they know how many people in a given month search how to make a pizza. Okay, so that's just one example. His argument is that we can use Google data and Google search results to figure out more about humans and what we're lying about to humans and other people, because he's saying we will be more honest on Google. We are honest about what we search for. We are honest about our problems, which I don't know why people search questions on Google like it's like Ask Jeeves, if you're old enough to remember what that was. But like, why would you ask? People ask Google like, will my son ever get married? How is Google supposed to know that? I don't know. But he takes those weird questions that people ask Google and he kind of conjectures some things about society that surveys wouldn't be able to tell you. His argument is that most people, or not most people, but a lot of people lie on surveys because they're either not sure it's anonymous, or maybe it's not an anonymous survey, or just the fact that someone else is asking them makes them self-conscious and makes them lie. And so he's saying that we can get a lot of information just from Google search engines about what people actually do and what people actually think. Interesting idea and concept. However, I don't think we know enough about this subject yet to really know either way. I want to believe that people don't lie that much, but maybe I'm naive in that. Maybe he's onto something. I don't know. I was just really kind of like going back and forth with this one. And the other thing I didn't like about this book was his tone. He had a weird sense of humor sometimes where he would kind of try to be funny, but it didn't come across as funny to me, or it just felt like it was trying too hard. It's hard to put my finger on it, but just the way it was written, I didn't totally enjoy it every step of the way. I'm gonna go with 3 stars for this one, just because I feel very, very conflicted. I feel very middle of the road with this one. I got some things out of it, and then there's also a lot of things that I already knew, and I felt like, well, yeah, that's not new information. We know that people are terrible. But this had a lot of interesting things to say. Yeah, you can pick it up for yourself and let me know what you think. This one was just kind of a weird one for me. Those are all the books that I read in the month of November. Let me know down below if you have any thoughts about these books, if you've read any of these books, and then also let me know what was the best book that you read in the month of November. Keep reading great books, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye-bye.